I'm standing in my kitchen at 3 in the morning, and my wife is asking me if I know what irony feels like. Not the literary kind. The kind that burns. The kind that makes you realize you spent 2 decades teaching strangers how to find love in 8 minutes while your own marriage was dying in slow motion, one forgotten anniversary at a time. And the worst part? I don't know when it started. Was it the night I stayed up coding the algorithm instead of coming to bed? Was it the 100th event where I smiled at someone else's breakthrough while she sat at home wondering if I even remembered her middle name anymore? Or was it the very first night, back in 1998, when I had this brilliant idea in a coffee shop and I saw dollar signs instead of the woman sitting across from me, asking me to just be present for once? My name is Jake Rosen, and I invented speed dating. Yeah, that Jake Rosen. The guy from the articles. The TED Talk. The man who supposedly revolutionized modern romance. And tonight, I'm going to tell you what no one else knows. Because the truth about innovation is that sometimes you create something that changes the world and ruins your own life at the same exact time. And you don't even notice it happening until it's too late. Let me take you back to where it all began. Los Angeles, 1997. I was 29 years old, working as a behavioral psychologist at UCLA, and I was absolutely terrible at dating. Not just regular bad. The kind of bad where you rehearse conversations in your head for 3 days and then say the complete wrong thing anyway. The kind of bad where you spend an entire evening with someone and realize halfway through dessert that you've been talking about your research for 2 straight hours and she hasn't said a single word. That was me. Awkward. Obsessive. Way too much in my own head. But I was fascinated by human connection. It was literally my job. I studied attachment theory, behavioral patterns, the psychology of first impressions. And I kept noticing this massive gap between what people said they wanted in relationships and how they actually went about finding them. Everyone I knew was miserable. My friends were going to bars, standing around for hours, hoping someone would talk to them. They were placing personal ads in newspapers, which felt desperate and strange. They were asking their mothers to set them up with the children of their mother's friends, which was just horrifying on every level. And I remember thinking, there has to be a better way. Something more efficient. More structured. Less painful. Because the problem wasn't that people didn't want connection. The problem was that the system was broken. The traditional dating model was essentially random chance mixed with alcohol and terrible lighting, and we were all just supposed to hope for the best. So I started thinking about it differently. What if dating was less like wandering through a dark forest hoping to stumble onto something good, and more like a structured interview process? What if we could remove all the awkwardness and uncertainty and replace it with clarity and efficiency? What if, instead of wasting 3 hours on a bad date, you could know in 8 minutes whether someone was worth your time? That was the seed. That was the moment that changed everything. But here's what I didn't know then, what I couldn't possibly have understood at 29 years old with my behavioral psychology degree and my complete lack of real relationship experience. When you turn romance into a system, when you make love efficient, you don't just change dating. You change how people think about each other. You change what they're looking for. You change what they believe is possible. And most importantly, you change yourself. I met Sarah in 1996, a full year before the speed dating idea even existed. She was a second-year medical resident at Cedars-Sinai, and we met at a mutual friend's birthday party. I remember she was standing by the kitchen counter, eating cake with her hands because all the forks were gone, and she was laughing at her own messiness. She had chocolate on her chin and she didn't care. That's what got me. She didn't care. I was the guy who cared about everything. I overthought every word, every gesture, every possible interpretation of every interaction. But Sarah was different. She was present. She was real. She looked at me and actually saw me, not the nervous version of me I was trying to hide, but the real person underneath all the anxiety. We started dating 2 weeks later. And for the first time in my entire life, I felt like I could breathe around another person. She didn't need me to be perfect. She didn't need me to perform. She just needed me to show up. That's what she always said. Just show up, Jake. That's all I'm asking. And for a while, I did. We'd stay up until 4 in the morning talking about everything and nothing. We'd drive to the beach at midnight just because we couldn't sleep. We'd make breakfast for dinner and dinner for breakfast and laugh at how neither of us knew how to be proper adults. She was working insane hours at the hospital, and I was buried in research, but we made it work. We found each other in the margins. She was the one who believed in me before I believed in myself. When I told her about the speed dating idea, it was just a random thought at 2 in the morning. We were lying in bed, and I said something like, what if instead of these long, painful dates where you don't know if there's chemistry, people could just meet a bunch of other people really quickly and figure out immediately who they clicked with? And she said, that's actually brilliant, Jake. You should do that. I remember looking at her in the dark and thinking, I'm going to marry this woman. We got married in January of 1998, right before everything exploded. Small ceremony, just family and a few close friends. She wore a dress she found at a vintage shop downtown, and I wore the only suit I owned. We wrote our own vows. Mine were too long and too complicated, as usual. Hers were 4 sentences. She said, I promise to love you when you're being impossible. I promise to remind you that you're human. I promise to be your home. And I promise to never stop showing up. I cried. I wasn't embarrassed about it. I cried because I knew, standing there in that moment, that she was saving me from myself. 3 months later, I hosted the first speed dating event. I'd spent weeks preparing. I'd written up guidelines, created scorecards, designed the entire process from start to finish. The concept was simple but specific. 20 people, 10 men and 10 women. 8 minutes per conversation. At the end of the night, everyone would mark down who they were interested in seeing again, and if 2 people marked each other, I'd facilitate an exchange of contact information. Structured. Efficient. No ambiguity. No wasted time. I rented out a small event space in Santa Monica and sent out flyers at coffee shops and college campuses. I had no idea if anyone would show up. I thought maybe I'd get 5 people if I was lucky. 43 people arrived that first night. I had to turn away 23 of them. I felt terrible, but also electric. This was working. This was actually working. By 2000, speed dating was in 12 countries. I'd been featured in Time magazine. I'd done interview. The energy in that room was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. There was nervousness, sure, but there was also excitement. Possibility. People were laughing. They were engaging. They were having real conversations instead of just standing around hoping someone would notice them. And at the end of the night, when I collected the scorecards, I had made 14 matches. 14 pairs of people who had found each other in the chaos. I drove home at midnight feeling like I'd discovered fire. Sarah was already asleep when I got back. She had a double shift the next day. I didn't wake her up. I just sat in our living room in the dark, holding those scorecards, thinking about what I'd just witnessed. I'd created something. Something real. Something that actually helped people. And I wanted more. The second event had 80 people trying to sign up. The third had over 100. By the 6th month, I was hosting events 3 times a week. I had a waiting list. I had people calling me from other cities asking if I could bring speed dating to them. I had newspapers writing articles about this revolutionary new approach to modern romance. I quit my job at UCLA. Sarah told me I was being reckless, but she also said she trusted me. She said if this is what you need to do, then do it. I'll support you. Just don't forget about us in the process. WS on morning shows. I'd given talks at conferences about behavioral psychology and the future of human connection. I'd written a book proposal that 3 publishers were fighting over. I was winning. I was achieving everything I'd ever dreamed of achieving. I was changing the world. And my marriage was dying. The fights started small. Missed dinners. Forgotten plans. She'd ask me to be home for something important, and I'd agree, and then an opportunity would come up and I'd have to reschedule. She'd be disappointed, and I'd feel guilty, and then I'd overcompensate by promising something even bigger next time. But next time would come and go, and I'd fail again, and the cycle would repeat. Eventually, she stopped asking. That's when I should have known something was really wrong. When she stopped asking, stopped expecting, stopped hoping that I'd show up. But I was too distracted to notice. I was too busy helping other people fall in love to see that my own wife was falling out of it. The irony didn't escape her. She mentioned it once, late at night after I came home from an event at 2 a.m. She said, "You know what's funny, Jake? You spend your entire life teaching people how to make connections in 8 minutes, but you can't even connect with me after 8 years." I didn't have a response. What could I say? She was right. But I still didn't change. I kept telling myself that this was temporary. That once I got speed dating to a stable place, once I hired enough people to manage the events, once the business was running smoothly, then I'd have time for us again. Then I'd be the husband she deserved. That's what I told myself for 3 more years. In 2003, I finally hired a management team. I finally took a step back from the daily operations. I finally had space in my schedule to breathe, to be present, to be home. And when I walked through our apartment door with flowers and a plan for us to go away for a weekend, Sarah looked at me like I was a stranger. She said, "Who are you trying to convince, Jake? Me or yourself?" I didn't understand the question. I said, "I'm here. I'm finally here. Isn't this what you wanted?" She said, 5 years ago, yes. 5 years ago I wanted this. I wanted you to choose me. I wanted you to see that building a life together was just as important as building a business. But you didn't choose me. You chose the work. You chose the validation. You chose being the speed dating guy over being my husband. And now you show up with flowers like that's going to fix half a decade of neglect? I said, "That's not fair. I was doing this for us. To build something. To create a future." She said, "We already had a future, Jake. We had each other. But you traded it for strangers and scorecards and 8-minute conversations that mean nothing once everyone goes home." I got angry then. I said things I shouldn't have said. I told her she didn't understand what it took to build something from nothing. I told her she didn't appreciate what I'd sacrificed. I told her that maybe if she'd been more supportive instead of constantly complaining about my absence, things would be different. She just looked at me. And then she said something that broke me. She said, "The saddest part is that you actually believe that." She moved out 3 weeks later. Not dramatically. Not with yelling or door slamming. She just packed her things while I was at a conference in Seattle, and when I came home, half of our apartment was gone. She left a note on the kitchen counter. It said, "I love you, Jake. I probably always will. But I can't keep showing up for someone who refuses to show up for me. I hope you find what you're looking for. I really do." I sat on our couch, in our half-empty apartment, holding that note, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt present. Completely, devastatingly present. Because for the first time in forever, there was no event to plan, no phone call to make, no next thing to move toward. There was just me and the wreckage of what I'd destroyed while I was too busy succeeding to notice. I didn't try to get her back right away. I knew that would be selfish. I knew that would just be me trying to fix my own guilt without actually dealing with what I'd done. So instead, I did something I hadn't done in years. I stopped. I canceled events. I took a sabbatical from the business. I went to therapy. Real therapy, not just reading psychology journals and thinking that counted. I sat with a woman named Dr. Patricia Chen twice a week for 6 months, and I unpacked everything. The obsession. The validation seeking. The way I'd turned human connection into a product while destroying my own most important connection in the process. Dr. Chen asked me once, "Do you know why you created speed dating, Jake?" And I gave her the rehearsed answer. To help people find love more efficiently. To solve a problem in the dating world. She said, "That's the public relations answer. What's the real answer?" And I sat there for a long time before I finally said it out loud. Because I was terrified of real intimacy. Because sitting with one person for hours, being fully seen, being fully known, that was too much. Too vulnerable. Too scary. So I created a system where no one had to do that. Where connection could happen in 8-minute bursts and then you could move on to the next person, the next possibility, without ever having to go deep. Without ever having to risk being truly known. I'd built a business out of my own emotional unavailability and called it innovation. Dr. Chen asked, "And what about Sarah? How did she fit into that pattern?" I said, "She was the exception. She was the one person I couldn't hide from. She saw me. Really saw me. And that terrified me. So I kept myself busy. I kept myself distracted. I built a career out of helping other people connect so I wouldn't have to face how badly I was failing at connecting with her." She nodded. And now I had to figure out how to be a different person. Not for Sarah, because I knew that ship might have already sailed. But for myself. Because I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep using achievement and success as a shield against actual human intimacy. I started small. I reached out to old friends I'd neglected. I started having real conversations again, the kind that lasted hours and went nowhere in particular. I started noticing things. The weather. The way light hit buildings at sunset. The sound of laughter in coffee shops. All the little moments I'd been too distracted to see for years. And slowly, I started to understand what Sarah had been trying to tell me all along. Life isn't efficient. Love isn't a system you can optimize. Connection doesn't happen on a schedule or through a structured process. It happens in the margins, in the moments you're not trying to control, in the vulnerability of just being with another person without an agenda or an exit strategy or a scorecard at the end. I reached out to Sarah after 8 months. Not to get her back. Just to apologize. Really apologize, not the defensive, excuse-making kind I'd done before. I told her I understood now. I understood that I'd failed her. That I'd chosen work over our marriage, validation over vulnerability, success over showing up. I told her she deserved better than what I'd given her, and I was sorry it took losing her for me to finally see that. She agreed to meet me for coffee. Just coffee. No expectations. She looked different. Lighter somehow. Like she'd been carrying something heavy for years and had finally put it down. She told me she was dating someone. A cardiology resident at her hospital. Someone who was present. Someone who showed up. I told her I was happy for her. And I meant it. Because I loved her enough to want her to have what she needed, even if that person wasn't me. We talked for 2 hours. Really talked. About everything. About where we went wrong. About what we could have done differently. About what we learned from the implosion. And at the end, she said something that changed how I thought about everything I'd built. She said, "You know what's strange, Jake? Speed dating probably helped thousands of people find relationships. You created something that genuinely made people's lives better. But the cost was your own relationship. And I wonder if that's always how it works. If the things we create to solve our own problems end up becoming the very thing that destroys us." I thought about that for a long time after she left. About creation and destruction. About how we often build our lives around running away from the things we're most afraid of, and then we're surprised when those things catch up to us anyway. I went back to work eventually. But differently. I hired someone else to run the events. I stepped away from the public-facing side of things. I stopped being the speed dating guy and started just being Jake again. Flawed, complicated, still figuring it all out Jake. And I started using what I'd learned, not just about behavioral psychology and human connection, but about presence and vulnerability and the difference between efficiency and intimacy, to actually help people. Real help. Not just facilitating 8-minute conversations but teaching them what I had to learn the hard way. That real connection takes time. That intimacy requires risk. That you can't optimize love without killing what makes it worth having in the first place. I started running workshops. Small groups. Not about how to find a partner quickly, but about how to actually build something that lasts once you find them. About communication. About showing up. About the difference between being physically present and emotionally available. About all the things I'd failed at with Sarah. People started responding differently. Not just with excitement about the possibility of meeting someone, but with recognition. With relief. Like I was finally saying something true instead of something marketable. One woman came up to me after a workshop and said, "This is the first time I've heard someone in the dating industry admit that there are no shortcuts. That it's messy and hard and requires you to actually be a real person instead of a curated version of yourself." I told her, I learned that lesson the hard way. Cost me my marriage. She said, "But you learned it. That's more than most people do." I don't know if that's true. But I do know that I'm different now. Not perfect. Not healed completely. But aware. Conscious. Trying. I still see Sarah occasionally. We're friends now, in that weird way that exes sometimes become friends after enough time has passed and the hurt has faded into something softer. She married the cardiology resident. I went to their wedding. It was beautiful. She looked happy. Actually happy, not the performance of happiness I'd gotten used to seeing in our last few years together. During the reception, she pulled me aside and said, "Thank you for letting me go. For not fighting it. For not making it harder than it had to be." I said, "Thank you for showing up for as long as you did. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. For trying to save something I was too stubborn to realize was worth saving." She hugged me. And in that hug, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Closure. Not the painful kind, but the kind that lets you move forward without carrying the weight of what could have been. I'm 46 now. Still single. Still figuring out how to do this whole human connection thing in a way that doesn't involve hiding behind work or achievement or the next big idea. I date sometimes. Actual dates, not speed dating. Long, inefficient, occasionally awkward dates where I have to be present and vulnerable and real. It's terrifying. But it's also the only thing that actually matters. I think about what speed dating became. It's everywhere now. It's been copied, franchised, turned into television shows and apps and countless variations. I don't own it anymore, not really. It became bigger than me. And that's okay. Because it was never supposed to be about me anyway. But I also think about the cost. About Sarah. About the years I lost because I was too afraid of intimacy to actually be intimate. About how I turned human connection into a system because systems are controllable and people aren't. And I wonder how many other people are doing the same thing. Building careers out of their own emotional unavailability. Creating solutions to problems they're not willing to face in themselves. Running so fast towards success that they don't notice what they're running away from until it's too late. Because that's the real story behind speed dating. Not that some smart guy figured out how to make dating more efficient. But that a scared guy figured out how to avoid real intimacy while convincing himself and everyone else that he was an expert on human connection. The truth is, I didn't invent speed dating to help people fall in love. I invented it so I wouldn't have to. And by the time I realized what I'd done, the person I loved most had already left. That's what irony feels like. The real kind. The kind that burns. I teach a class now at UCLA, where I used to work all those years ago. It's not about speed dating or behavioral psychology or optimizing romance. It's about presence. About showing up. About the difference between building a career and building a life. On the first day, I always tell my students the same thing. I say, you can be successful and you can be connected, but not if you're using one to avoid the other. Not if you're building systems to replace intimacy. Not if you're running toward achievement because you're afraid of vulnerability. I tell them, I know because I did it. I built something that changed how millions of people date. And in the process, I lost the only relationship that actually mattered. Some of them look at me like I'm being dramatic. Like I'm exaggerating for effect. But others get it. I can see it in their eyes. The recognition. The fear that they're doing the same thing. That they're already starting down the path I went down, using ambition and busyness and constant movement to avoid the hard work of just being with another person. Those are the ones I try to reach. The ones I tell, stop now. Before it's too late. Before you wake up at 3 in the morning and someone asks you what irony feels like and you actually know the answer. Last month, I ran into one of the couples from my very first speed dating event back in 1998. They've been married for 23 years. 3 kids. Still crazy about each other. They recognized me immediately and came over to thank me. They said I'd changed their lives. That they never would have met without that night. I asked them what their secret was. How they made it work when so many others don't. The husband said, we show up. Even when it's hard. Even when we're busy. Even when we'd rather be doing something else. We made a commitment that no matter what, we'd show up for each other. His wife squeezed his hand and looked at me and said, it's the simplest thing in the world. But also the hardest. I thought about Sarah. About her vows. About her promise to never stop showing up. About how she kept that promise long after I'd broken mine. I told them, you're right. It is the hardest thing. I'm still learning how. They smiled at me with something like pity and something like hope, and then they walked away, hand in hand, back into their life that they'd built together by doing the one thing I couldn't figure out how to do. They showed up. I think about that moment a lot. About the couple I helped bring together who figured out what I couldn't. About how the thing I created was good and real and valuable, but only because the people using it understood something I didn't. That the system isn't the point. The 8 minutes isn't the point. The scorecard isn't the point. The point is what happens after. The point is showing up, over and over again, long after the initial excitement fades. The point is choosing someone and continuing to choose them, even when it's boring or hard or inconvenient. The point is being present. Really present. Not physically there while your mind is somewhere else, but actually engaged, actually listening, actually caring about the small details of another person's life. That's what I missed. That's what I finally understand now, 17 years too late. I went back to therapy last year. Different therapist this time, a guy named Marcus who specializes in workaholism and avoidance patterns. I told him about Sarah. About speed dating. About how I'd turned my fear of intimacy into a career. He asked me, if you could go back and do it differently, would you? And I had to think about that. Because the obvious answer is yes, of course I would. I'd be more present. I'd prioritize my marriage. I'd build the business without sacrificing the relationship. But the honest answer is more complicated. Because I don't know if I could have done it differently then. I wasn't ready. I wasn't aware. I didn't have the tools or the understanding or the willingness to be that vulnerable. I had to lose everything to learn what actually mattered. So I told Marcus, I don't know if I would do it differently. But I'd do it differently now. If I got another chance. If someone was willing to trust me again. I'd show up. I'd be present. I'd choose the person over the work, the intimacy over the validation, the quiet moments over the applause. He said, that's growth, Jake. That's all anyone can ask for. But it doesn't feel like enough. Because Sarah is married to someone else. Because I can't get those years back. Because I revolutionized how people date, but I still don't know how to be in a relationship without running away. I date now, like I said. Slowly. Carefully. I tell people on the first date about Sarah. About what I did wrong. About what I'm trying to learn. Some of them appreciate the honesty. Others think I'm not ready, and they're probably right. There was one woman, Maya, who I dated for about 6 months last year. She was a social worker, naturally empathetic and patient, and she saw right through all my defenses from day one. She'd call me out when I was hiding. When I was using work as an excuse not to be vulnerable. When I was starting to retreat into old patterns. And for 6 months, I didn't run. I stayed. I showed up. I did the hard work of actually being in a relationship instead of just performing the idea of one. But then she got a job offer in Boston. A dream position, the kind of opportunity you don't turn down. And she asked me to come with her. Not to get married or make some huge commitment, just to come. To continue building what we'd started in a new city. And I froze. Because that's what love requires, right? Sacrifice. Flexibility. Putting someone else's needs equal to or above your own. And I wanted to. I genuinely wanted to. But I couldn't say yes. The words got stuck somewhere between my brain and my mouth. She knew before I even spoke. She said, "It's okay, Jake. I get it. You're not ready. Maybe you'll never be ready. But I can't wait around to find out." She moved to Boston 2 months ago. We don't talk anymore. And I don't blame her. She deserves someone who can show up without hesitation. Someone who doesn't need 17 years and a failed marriage to learn that love is supposed to come first. But that's where I am now. Still learning. Still trying. Still hoping that eventually, I'll figure this out. I've been thinking about writing a book. Not about speed dating or how to meet people or behavioral psychology tips for better relationships. But about this. About failure. About creating something successful while destroying what matters most. About the cost of innovation when you're innovating away from your own problems instead of facing them. I don't know if anyone would want to read it. It's not exactly an uplifting story. Guy creates speed dating, loses wife, learns nothing until it's too late, still single and broken at 46. Not the typical hero's journey. But maybe that's the point. Maybe we need more stories about people who succeed in all the ways society measures success and still end up alone at 3 in the morning, wondering what it was all for. Maybe we need more stories about the cost of ambition. About what we sacrifice when we chase achievement at the expense of everything else. About the difference between being important and being loved. I gave a talk at a conference last month. Small event, maybe 200 people. It was supposed to be about the history of speed dating and lessons learned about human connection. But halfway through, I went off script. I told them about Sarah. About the real story. About how I built something that helped thousands of people while destroying my own relationship. Some people were uncomfortable. You could feel it in the room. They didn't want the messy truth. They wanted the inspirational success story. But others leaned in. They wanted to hear more. Because they recognized themselves in what I was saying. They saw their own patterns, their own avoidance, their own tendency to use work or achievement or busyness to hide from the hard work of actual intimacy. After the talk, dozens of people came up to me. Not to congratulate me on speed dating or ask for advice about their businesses. But to say thank you. Thank you for being honest. Thank you for admitting failure. Thank you for showing them what they might be headed toward if they don't change now. One man, probably in his 30s, said to me, "I knew 15 years ago. I'm building something. I'm obsessed with it. And my girlfriend keeps asking me to be more present. And I keep saying later. After this milestone. After this launch. After this thing settles down. But it never settles down, does it?" I said, "No. It never does. Not unless you make it settle down. Not unless you decide that the person is more important than the thing you're building." He said, "How do I do that? How do I stop?" And I realized I didn't have a good answer. Because I never figured it out. Not in time, anyway. So I told him, I don't know. But start with showing up. Physically and emotionally. When she's talking to you, put down your phone and actually listen. When she needs you, be there. Not later. Not after the next thing. Now. Make her the priority instead of the afterthought. Do all the things I didn't do. Learn from my mistakes instead of making your own. He nodded. And I hope he listened. I hope he's different than I was. I hope he changes before it's too late. Because that's all I can do now. Share the story. Be honest about the failure. Hope that someone, somewhere, hears it and makes a different choice. I still run speed dating events occasionally. Not often, but sometimes. When I do, I watch the people carefully. I watch them fill out their scorecards. I watch them make decisions about who they want to see again based on 8 minutes of conversation. And I think about what they don't know yet. That the 8 minutes doesn't matter. That the initial attraction or clever conversation or shared interests, those are nice but they're not the thing. The thing is what comes after. The thing is whether they can show up for each other when it's not exciting anymore. When it's just Tuesday night and someone had a bad day at work and needs the other person to just be there. That's the real test. Not whether you can be charming for 8 minutes. But whether you can be present for 8 years. For 18 years. For a lifetime. I don't tell them this during the events. It would ruin the mood. But I think it. Every time. A few months ago, Sarah called me. Out of nowhere. Just to talk, she said. We hadn't spoken in almost a year. She told me she was pregnant. First child. She was nervous and excited and wanted to share it with someone who knew her before she became this version of herself. I was honored that she thought of me. We talked for almost 2 hours. About her life. About her marriage. About how different it was to be with someone who showed up consistently. She said, "It's not perfect, Jake. He leaves dishes in the sink and he snores and sometimes he says the wrong thing. But he's there. Every day. He chooses me every day. And that makes all the difference." I told her I was happy for her. That she deserved everything she was getting. That she'd waited long enough for someone to treat her the way she should have been treated all along. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I don't regret our marriage, you know. Even though it ended badly. Even though you weren't ready. I don't regret it. Because you helped me figure out what I needed. What I wouldn't settle for anymore. So thank you for that." I didn't know what to say. How do you respond to your ex-wife thanking you for failing her so thoroughly that she knew exactly what she needed in her next relationship? I just said, "You're welcome." And I meant it. Because if my failure led to her happiness, then maybe it meant something after all. After we hung up, I sat with that conversation for a long time. Thinking about redemption. About whether you can ever really make up for the damage you've caused. About whether growth counts if it comes too late to save the thing you destroyed. I don't have answers to those questions. But I'm learning to sit with them anyway. To not run from the discomfort. To not fill the silence with work or distraction or the next big idea. That's the real work, I think. Not building businesses or creating systems or solving problems for other people. But just being. Being present with yourself. Being honest about your failures. Being willing to sit in the mess you made and not immediately try to fix it or optimize it or turn it into a learning opportunity for your next TED Talk. I've been alone for a long time now. By choice, mostly. Because I'm still figuring out how to be a whole person instead of a collection of achievements and defenses. And until I figure that out, I don't have any business being in someone else's life. But I'm getting there. Slowly. Imperfectly. Some days I backslide into old patterns. I catch myself working too much, hiding behind projects, using productivity as a shield against feeling. But now I notice it. I see it happening. And I can choose to stop. That's the difference between who I was and who I'm becoming. Awareness. The ability to see my own patterns and interrupt them before they destroy everything around me. My therapist Marcus asked me last week, "What do you want, Jake?" Not what you think you should want. Not what would make a good story. What do you actually want for your life? And I said, I want to be the kind of person who shows up. I want to care about someone else's Tuesday as much as I care about my own big moments. I want to build something that doesn't cost me everything that matters. I want to be chosen by someone and actually be worthy of that choice. He said, "That's beautiful, Jake. Now how do you make that happen?" And that's the question I'm still working on. Because wanting something and being capable of having it are two very different things. I can want to be present and still find myself drifting away. I can want to prioritize people over work and still catch myself checking emails during conversations. I can want to be vulnerable and still feel my chest tighten every time someone gets too close. But I'm trying. That has to count for something. I think about Sarah often. Not in a pining way, not wishing I could get her back. But wondering if she knows how much she changed me. How her leaving was the kindest thing she could have done, even though it didn't feel kind at the time. How she forced me to face the person I'd become and decide whether I wanted to stay that way. She saved my life by walking away from it. That's the truth I've come to understand. And maybe that's the real moral of this story. Not every relationship is supposed to last forever. Sometimes people come into your life to show you who you are, to hold up a mirror you've been avoiding, to love you enough to leave when staying would enable your worst patterns. Sarah did that for me. She loved me enough to let me fail. To let me face the consequences of my choices. To refuse to keep showing up for someone who refused to show up for her. That takes incredible strength. More strength than I had. More strength than I gave her credit for until it was too late. I wonder sometimes what would have happened if I'd figured this out sooner. If I'd gone to therapy when we were still married. If I'd recognized the patterns before they destroyed us. Would we have made it? Would I have been capable of being the husband she needed? I'll never know. And I'm learning to be okay with that uncertainty. With the not knowing. With the reality that some questions don't have answers and some damage can't be undone. All I can do is be different now. Be better now. Be the kind of person who could have a real relationship if the opportunity presented itself again. And maybe that's enough. Maybe you don't always get redemption in the form you want it. Maybe sometimes redemption is just becoming someone you can live with. Someone who doesn't hate the person in the mirror. Someone who's doing the work even though no one's watching. I teach my students this now. I tell them, you don't grow for an audience. You don't heal for applause. You do the work in private, in the quiet moments when no one's keeping score, because it's the right thing to do. Because you deserve to be whole. Because the people you love deserve someone who's done the work. Some of them get it immediately. Others think I'm being too intense, too heavy for a class about human behavior and relationships. But the ones who get it, they really get it. I see them nodding. I see them writing things down. I see them staying after class to tell me their own stories of almost losing someone because they were too busy succeeding to notice they were failing at what mattered. Those conversations are why I teach now. Not for the paycheck or the prestige or the CV line. But because maybe I can help someone avoid the mistakes I made. Maybe I can be the wake-up call for someone who's heading down the same path I went down. That's my purpose now. Not revolutionizing dating or building empires or being the guy who invented something. But being honest. Being vulnerable. Being willing to stand in front of people and say, I failed. I lost what mattered most. And here's what I learned. Here's what I wish I'd known. Here's what I'd do differently if I could go back. It's not glamorous. It's not inspiring in the traditional sense. But it's real. And people respond to real in a way they never responded to the polished, successful version of me. Last week, a former student emailed me. She'd taken my class 3 years ago. She said, I just wanted to thank you. Your story about your ex-wife stuck with me. I was doing the same thing in my relationship, prioritizing my career over my partner, telling myself it was temporary. But after your class, I made changes. I started showing up. And last month, we got engaged. So thank you. Thank you for being honest about your failure. It helped me avoid mine. I cried reading that email. Not sad crying. Grateful crying. Because maybe my failure could mean something. Maybe the wreckage of my marriage could be the lighthouse that keeps someone else off the rocks. That's not redemption, exactly. It doesn't undo what I did to Sarah. But it's something. It's purpose. It's meaning extracted from the mess. I've been thinking about reaching out to Sarah again. Not to reopen old wounds or ask for anything. Just to tell her about the student. To let her know that her pain, our pain, helped someone else. That it wasn't entirely wasted. But I don't know if that's selfish. If that's me trying to make myself feel better by telling her that good came from bad. So I haven't sent the message yet. I'm sitting with it. Asking myself what my real motivation is. Trying to be honest with myself in a way I wasn't capable of being 15 years ago. That's the work. Constantly interrogating your own motives. Constantly asking yourself, am I doing this for the right reasons? Am I showing up authentically or performing a version of showing up? Am I being vulnerable or performing vulnerability? It's exhausting. It's so much easier to just do things without thinking about them too deeply. To trust your instincts and move forward and not second-guess every decision. But my instincts led me to build a career while destroying a marriage. My instincts told me that success and love were compatible, that I could have both if I just worked hard enough, that I didn't need to choose. So now I don't trust my instincts. I question them. I sit with them. I bring them to therapy and examine them under a microscope before I act on them. It's a slower way to live. But it's a more conscious way. And consciousness, I'm learning, is the only antidote to the kind of destruction I caused. Marcus asked me recently if I ever regret inventing speed dating. If I wish I could take it back, knowing what it cost me. I thought about it for a long time. Because the easy answer is yes, of course I regret it. It ruined my marriage. It consumed my life. It turned me into someone I didn't recognize. But the honest answer is more complicated. Because speed dating has helped people. Real people. Thousands of them. Maybe more. I get emails occasionally from couples who met at events, who are building lives together, who found each other through the system I created. And that matters. That's not nothing. So I told Marcus, I don't regret creating it. I regret how I created it. I regret what I sacrificed for it. I regret using it as a shield against intimacy instead of a bridge toward it. But the thing itself? No. I don't regret that. He said, can you hold both? Can you acknowledge that something good came from your worst patterns? That your brokenness created something valuable even as it broke you further? I said, I'm trying to. I'm trying to see the full picture instead of just the failure or just the success. I'm trying to be okay with the complexity. He smiled. That's healing, Jake. That's what it looks like. But it doesn't feel like healing. It feels like constantly walking a tightrope between self-forgiveness and accountability. Between acknowledging growth and not letting myself off the hook too easily. Between accepting what I can't change and committing to being different going forward. I don't know if I'll ever get it right. I don't know if I'll ever be the kind of person who can sustain a healthy relationship. I don't know if the damage I did to myself, the patterns I reinforced for so many years, can ever be fully undone. But I keep showing up. To therapy. To my students. To the slow, unglamorous work of becoming someone different. Someone better. Someone who might be worthy of love someday. That's all I have. That's my offering. Not success or innovation or some revolutionary new idea. Just a man who failed spectacularly and is trying to learn from it. A man who destroyed what mattered most and is spending the rest of his life trying to understand why. I don't know if that's enough. But it's all I've got. There's a coffee shop I go to sometimes. Same one where I first had the idea for speed dating back in '97. It's changed ownership 3 times since then, renovated twice, but it's still there. Still serving overpriced lattes to anxious millennials and Gen Z kids with laptops and big dreams. That takes incredible strength. More strength than I had. More strength than I gave her credit for until it was too late. I wonder sometimes what would have happened if I'd figured this out sooner. If I'd gone to therapy when we were still married. If I'd recognized the patterns before they destroyed us. Would we have made it? Would I have been capable of being the husband she needed? I'll never know. And I'm learning to be okay with that uncertainty. With the not knowing. With the reality that some questions don't have answers and some damage can't be undone. All I can do is be different now. Be better now. Be the kind of person who could have a real relationship if the opportunity presented itself again. And maybe that's enough. Maybe you don't always get redemption in the form you want it. Maybe sometimes redemption is just becoming someone you can live with. Someone who doesn't hate the person in the mirror. Someone who's doing the work even though no one's watching. I teach my students this now. I tell them, you don't grow for an audience. You don't heal for applause. You do the work in private, in the quiet moments when no one's keeping score, because it's the right thing to do. Because you deserve to be whole. Because the people you love deserve someone who's done the work. Some of them get it immediately. Others think I'm being too intense, too heavy for a class about human behavior and relationships. But the ones who get it, they really get it. I see them nodding. I see them writing things down. I see them staying after class to tell me their own stories of almost losing someone because they were too busy succeeding to notice they were failing at what mattered. Those conversations are why I teach now. Not for the paycheck or the prestige or the CV line. But because maybe I can help someone avoid the mistakes I made. Maybe I can be the wake-up call for someone who's heading down the same path I went down. That's my purpose now. Not revolutionizing dating or building empires or being the guy who invented something. But being honest. Being vulnerable. Being willing to stand in front of people and say, I failed. I lost what mattered most. And here's what I learned. Here's what I wish I'd known. Here's what I'd do differently if I could go back. It's not glamorous. It's not inspiring in the traditional sense. But it's real. And people respond to real in a way they never responded to the polished, successful version of me. Last week, a former student emailed me. She'd taken my class 3 years ago. She said, I just wanted to thank you. Your story about your ex-wife stuck with me. I was doing the same thing in my relationship, prioritizing my career over my partner, telling myself it was temporary. But after your class, I made changes. I started showing up. And last month, we got engaged. So thank you. Thank you for being honest about your failure. It helped me avoid mine. I cried reading that email. Not sad crying. Grateful crying. Because maybe my failure could mean something. Maybe the wreckage of my marriage could be the lighthouse that keeps someone else off the rocks. That's not redemption, exactly. It doesn't undo what I did to Sarah. But it's something. It's purpose. It's meaning extracted from the mess. I've been thinking about reaching out to Sarah again. Not to reopen old wounds or ask for anything. Just to tell her about the student. To let her know that her pain, our pain, helped someone else. That it wasn't entirely wasted. But I don't know if that's selfish. If that's me trying to make myself feel better by telling her that good came from bad. So I haven't sent the message yet. I'm sitting with it. Asking myself what my real motivation is. Trying to be honest with myself in a way I wasn't capable of being 15 years ago. That's the work. Constantly interrogating your own motives. Constantly asking yourself, am I doing this for the right reasons? Am I showing up authentically or performing a version of showing up? Am I being vulnerable or performing vulnerability? It's exhausting. It's so much easier to just do things without thinking about them too deeply. to trust your instincts and move forward and not second-guess every decision. But my instincts led me to build a career while destroying a marriage. My instincts told me that success and love were compatible, that I could have both if I just worked hard enough, that I didn't need to choose. So now I don't trust my instincts. I question them. I sit with them. I bring them to therapy and examine them under a microscope before I act on them. It's a slower way to live. But it's a more conscious way. And consciousness, I'm learning, is the only antidote to the kind of destruction I caused. Marcus asked me recently if I ever regret inventing speed dating. If I wish I could take it back, knowing what it cost me. I thought about it for a long time. Because the easy answer is yes, of course I regret it. It ruined my marriage. It consumed my life. It turned me into someone I didn't recognize. But the honest answer is more complicated. Because speed dating has helped people. Real people. Thousands of them. Maybe more. I get emails occasionally from couples who met at events, who are building lives together, who found each other through the system I created. And that matters. That's not nothing. So I told Marcus, I don't regret creating it. I regret how I created it. I regret what I sacrificed for it. I regret using it as a shield against intimacy instead of a bridge toward it. But the thing itself? No. I don't regret that. He said, can you hold both? Can you acknowledge that something good came from your worst patterns? That your brokenness created something valuable even as it broke you further? I said, I'm trying to. I'm trying to see the full picture instead of just the failure or just the success. I'm trying to be okay with the complexity. He smiled. That's healing, Jake. That's what it looks like. But it doesn't feel like healing. It feels like constantly walking a tightrope between self-forgiveness and accountability. Between acknowledging growth and not letting myself off the hook too easily. Between accepting what I can't change and committing to being different going forward. I don't know if I'll ever get it right. I don't know if I'll ever be the kind of person who can sustain a healthy relationship. I don't know if the damage I did to myself, the patterns I reinforced for so many years, can ever be fully undone. But I keep showing up. To therapy. To my students. To the slow, unglamorous work of becoming someone different. Someone better. Someone who might be worthy of love someday. That's all I have. That's my offering. Not success or innovation or some revolutionary new idea. Just a man who failed spectacularly and is trying to learn from it. A man who destroyed what mattered most and is spending the rest of his life trying to understand why. I don't know if that's enough. But it's all I've got. There's a coffee shop I go to sometimes. Same one where I first had the idea for speed dating back in '97. It's changed ownership 3 times since then, renovated twice, but it's still there. Still serving overpriced lattes to anxious millennials and Gen Z kids with laptops and big dreams. I sit there sometimes and watch people. Couples mostly. I watch how they interact. Who's present and who's distracted. Who's really listening and who's just waiting for their turn to talk. Who's building something real and who's performing relationship for an invisible audience. And I think about Sarah. About how she used to look at me when I was actually present, really present, before the business consumed me. How her whole face would light up. How she'd squeeze my hand under the table like she couldn't believe her luck, being with someone who actually saw her. I took that for granted. I thought it would always be there. I thought I could put it on hold while I chased success and it would just wait for me, unchanged, ready to resume when I was ready. But people aren't pause buttons. Relationships aren't projects you can set aside and pick up later. Love requires constant attention, constant choice, constant presence. I know that now. It cost me everything to learn it, but I know it. A young couple sits down at the table next to me. Early 20s, maybe. Clearly in the honeymoon phase. They can't stop touching each other. Can't stop smiling. Can't stop being completely absorbed in each other's existence. The guy's phone buzzes. Work email, Probably. I watch him glance at it. I watch him start to reach for it. And then I watch him stop. I watch him turn the phone face down. I watch him look at his girlfriend and say something like, "It can wait. You're more important." And she beams at him. Really beams. Like he just gave her the world instead of just his undivided attention for another 10 minutes. I want to go over to them. I want to tell them, keep doing that. Keep choosing her. Keep turning the phone face down. Keep remembering that she's more important than whatever notification is trying to steal your attention. Keep being present even when it's boring, even when the excitement fades, even when it feels like you've heard all her stories before. But I don't. Because they don't need my baggage. They don't need my cautionary tale. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Maybe they'll figure it out on their own. Maybe they're the kind of people who naturally know how to prioritize love over everything else. I hope they are. I hope they never have to learn the lesson I learned. I hope they get to build a whole life together without having to destroy the first version of themselves to figure out what actually matters. I finish my coffee and leave. The barista waves goodbye. She knows me now. The sad middle-aged guy who comes in 3 times a week and sits alone and watches couples like he's studying for a test he already failed. I wonder what she thinks of me. If she's created a whole story in her head about who I am and why I'm always alone. If she knows I'm the speed dating guy. If she's Googled me and found the articles and the interviews and put together that the successful man from the headlines is the same lonely man buying lattes on Tuesday afternoons. Probably not. People don't pay that much attention to strangers. We're all the main characters of our own stories, and everyone else is just background noise. That's what I forgot with Sarah. That in her story, she was the main character. Not me. And main characters deserve more than cameo appearances from their partners. They deserve co-stars. They deserve people who show up for the boring scenes, not just the dramatic ones. I walk home. It's a nice day. Sunny. Warm. The kind of day that makes Los Angeles worth living in despite the traffic and the cost and the constant feeling that everyone's performing a version of success instead of living an actual life. I think about what I'll do with the rest of my day. I have no events. No meetings. No urgent work that needs my attention. Just hours stretching out ahead of me, empty and full of possibility. It used to terrify me. All that unstructured time. All that space for thoughts and feelings and the kind of stillness that forces you to face yourself. I used to fill it immediately. Find work. Create projects. Build something new so I wouldn't have to sit with who I was when I wasn't building anything. But now I'm okay with it. The emptiness. The stillness. The just being alive without any particular agenda or achievement to justify my existence. I'll probably read. Maybe go for a run. Maybe call my sister, who I neglected for years while I was building the business and who somehow still answers when I call. Maybe I'll work on the book I'm writing about all of this. The failure. The lessons. The long, slow journey toward becoming someone different. Or maybe I'll just sit on my couch and do nothing. And that will be okay too. That's what healing looks like for me. Not dramatic breakthroughs or sudden transformations. Just the slow accumulation of days where I choose presence over distraction. Where I sit with discomfort instead of running from it. Where I'm okay being alone without feeling lonely. I'm 46 years old. I invented something that changed how millions of people date. I was featured in major magazines. I gave talks at prestigious conferences. I built a business from nothing. And I lost my wife because I couldn't figure out how to be present for dinner. That's my legacy. Not the success. The failure. The cautionary tale. The man who had everything and threw it away because he was too afraid of intimacy to notice he was destroying the only real intimacy he'd ever had. But I'm still here. Still trying. Still learning. Still hoping that someday, maybe, I'll get another chance. And if I do, I'll be ready. I'll be different. I'll be the kind of person who knows how to show up. That's all I can do. Keep showing up for the work of becoming someone who knows how to show up for others. It's not poetic. It's not inspiring. But it's honest. And honesty, I've learned, is the only thing that actually matters in the end. I think about Sarah's baby. About the life she's building with someone who figured out what I couldn't. About how she's going to be an amazing mother because she knows what it looks like to show up unconditionally. She practiced it with me for years, even though I didn't reciprocate. Her child is lucky. Her husband is lucky. They're building something real while I'm over here still trying to figure out the basics. But I'm not bitter about it. Not anymore. I'm genuinely happy for her. Because she deserves happiness. She deserves everything she's getting and more. And maybe that's growth too. Being able to celebrate someone else's joy even when it highlights your own failure. Being able to want good things for people even when those good things don't include you. I unlock my apartment door. It's quiet inside. Always quiet. No one to greet me. No one to ask how my day was. No one to share the small, mundane moments that make up a life. But I'm okay with it. For now. Because I'm not ready yet. I'm not healed enough. I'm not whole enough to bring someone else into this mess. Someday, maybe. Someday I'll be ready to try again. To risk vulnerability. To choose someone and keep choosing them even when it's hard. But not today. Today I'm just going to be. Be present with myself. Be honest about where I am. Be okay with the fact that healing takes longer than breaking did. I make dinner. Nothing fancy. Pasta and vegetables. I eat it at my kitchen table, alone, no phone, no TV, no distractions. Just me and my thoughts in the quiet. And it's okay. It's actually okay. That's the surprising thing about doing the work. Eventually, your own company becomes bearable. Eventually, you stop needing constant stimulation to avoid feeling. Eventually, you can just be. I'm not there yet. Not completely. But I'm closer than I was. And that's something. That's progress. That's the slow, unglamorous work of becoming a different person paying off in tiny, almost imperceptible ways. After dinner, I sit on my couch and think about calling someone. A friend. My sister. Someone to fill the silence. But I don't. I just sit. And I let the silence be what it is. And in that silence, I hear something I haven't heard in years. Not a voice exactly. Not a revelation. Just a quiet sense of okay. A sense that maybe I'm going to be alright. Maybe I won't always be alone. Maybe the work I'm doing is leading somewhere. Or maybe it's not. Maybe I'll be alone forever. Maybe the damage is too deep. Maybe I missed my chance and this is just what my life is now. But either way, I'm okay. I'm here. I'm trying. I'm doing the work even though no one's watching and no one's keeping score. That has to be enough. That has to mean something. I think about the speed dating events happening tonight. Somewhere in Los Angeles, somewhere in New York, somewhere in Tokyo or London or Sydney, people are sitting across from each other for 8 minutes, trying to make connections, trying to find something real. And I hope they do. I genuinely hope they find what they're looking for. I hope the system I created helps them. I hope they use it as a starting point and then do all the hard work that comes after. The showing up work. The being present work. The choosing someone every single day work. That's what speed dating can't teach you. That's what no system can optimize. The actual daily practice of loving someone. The boring parts. The hard parts. The parts where there's no excitement or novelty, just the choice to keep showing up. I couldn't do it. But maybe they can. Maybe the next generation will figure out what I couldn't. Maybe they'll use the tools I created without making the mistakes I made. That's my hope, anyway. That something good can come from this wreckage. That my failure can illuminate the path for someone else. I close my eyes. And for the first time and longer than I can remember, I feel something like peace. Not happiness. Not contentment. But peace. The quiet acceptance that this is where I am, this is who I am, and I'm doing the best I can with what I have. It's not the ending I wanted. It's not the ending anyone wants for their story. The guy who invented speed dating sitting alone in his apartment at 46, still figuring out how to have a real relationship. But it's my ending. At least for now. And I'm learning to be okay with that. Because maybe that's what redemption looks like. Not a dramatic turnaround. Not getting the girl back. Not fixing everything you broke. Maybe redemption is just being honest about what you did wrong. Being willing to change. Being okay with the consequences of your choices. Being at peace with the person you were while still working to become someone better. If that's redemption, then maybe I'm on the right track. Maybe I'm exactly where I need to be. The sun is setting outside my window. Orange and pink light filtering through the blinds. It's beautiful. I notice it. I actually stop and notice it instead of being distracted by my phone or my thoughts or my endless mental list of things I should be doing. I notice the light. And I think, Sarah would have loved this. She always loved sunsets. And then I think, I hope she's watching the sunset right now too. With her husband. With her hand on her belly, feeling the baby move. I hope she's exactly as happy as she deserves to be. That's growth. That's healing. Being able to think about her without the guilt crushing me. Being able to wish her well without needing anything in return. I'm not there yet on everything. But on this, I am. On Sarah, I've finally reached a place of genuine peace. And maybe that's enough for today. Maybe you don't have to heal everything all at once. Maybe you just heal one piece at a time, slowly, over years, until eventually you look back and realize you're not the person you used to be. I'm not the person I used to be. I'm still broken in some ways. Still figuring it out. Still learning the basics that most people mastered years ago. But I'm different. I'm aware. I'm trying. And that's more than I could say 5 years ago. More than I could say 10 years ago when Sarah walked out and I didn't even understand why. So if you're watching this right now, if you've made it this far in my story, here's what I want you to know. Success doesn't mean anything if you're alone. Achievement doesn't matter if you sacrificed love to get it. You can change the world and still lose everything that actually matters. I know because I did it. I invented speed dating and I lost my marriage. And given the choice, I'd trade it all to go back and just show up for dinner. But I can't go back. None of us can. All we can do is be different now. Be better now. Be the person we wish we'd been before we knew better. So show up. For the people you love. For the small moments. For the Tuesday nights that don't seem important until they're gone. Show up even when it's boring. Show up even when you're tired. Show up even when work is calling and opportunities are knocking and the whole world seems to be asking for your attention. Show up for the people who matter. Because they won't wait forever. And when they leave, you'll finally understand what you lost. And by then, it'll be too late. I'm Jake Rosen. I invented speed dating. And I'm spending the rest of my life learning how to actually be present for another human being. That's my story. That's my cautionary tale. That's my offering to you. Don't be me. Be better. Choose love. Show up. Please. Learn from my mistakes instead of making your own. The world doesn't need more innovations. It needs more people who know how to be present for each other. Who understand that the most revolutionary thing you can do is just consistently show up for someone you love. That's it. That's the secret I learned too late. That's what I want you to take from this. Not how to find love in 8 minutes. But how to keep it for 8 years. For 18 years. For a lifetime. That's the real work. And it's work I'm still learning how to do. So if you're watching this from wherever you are, whatever time it is, whatever you're going through right now, tell me in the comments. Tell me where you are and what time it is and if this story meant something to you. Tell me if you recognized yourself in any part of it. Tell me if you're going to make different choices because of what I shared. Because that's why I told you all of this. Not for attention or sympathy or absolution. But because maybe my failure can save someone else's relationship. Maybe my story can be the wake-up call someone needs before they make the same mistakes I did. And if you found value in this, if it resonated with you, if it made you think about your own life differently, hit that subscribe button. Because I'm going to keep telling stories like this. Real stories. Honest stories. Stories about failure and growth and the messy work of becoming a better person. Next video, I'm going to talk about the 3 years after Sarah left, and what I learned in therapy that completely changed how I understood myself. It's raw. It's uncomfortable. But it's real. So subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one. Until then, just show up. For yourself. For the people you love. For the life you actually want instead of the success you think you need. That's all that matters in the end. I promise you. I learned it the hard way so you don't have to. Take care of yourselves. And take care of each other. That's the only thing that actually counts.